There were many eyes looking at me with worried expressions. Everyone was reaching out to me, but I didn't know whose hand to take. I finally collapsed to my knees and sat down on the spot. Then, I woke up. It's been a while since I had that dream. I pulled my sweat-soaked t-shirt away from my skin and got up. I got out of bed and stared at the wall. There were several certificates with my name Hugo Reed written on them. A gold award for a book report I wrote in elementary school. In middle school, I consistently achieved good results in the kendo club. Until I was 15 and my sister was born, I worked really hard. Bringing home these solemn pieces of paper made my parents jump for joy. It doesn't matter if I take these with me. I reached out to the framed certificates on the wall. Suddenly, my bedroom door swung open with a bang. Hugo, if you don't get up soon. Oh, you're already awake. How many times do I have to tell you to knock before you come in? It's your fault for not locking the door. My sister, Lily, saluted and smiled brightly like the sun. It's rare for you to wake up before me, Lily. What are you talking about? I'm 12 now. I've never been late since I became a senior in elementary school. Such a cheeky kid. Who do you think walked you to school every day when you missed the group walk? I sighed exaggeratedly, and Lily shrugged and laughed. It's a typical peaceful and happy weekend morning. Anyone would see it that way. But between me and Lily, there's an invisible wall. A thick, high wall. Your room is still messy. Will you be ready in time? How long until the move? Lily asked as she went down the stairs. I couldn't see the expression on her face as she talked to me. Less than 3 weeks. So you need to make sure you can get up by yourself. You're so persistent. Aren't you going to be lonely without me? I was at a loss for words. Sometimes I didn't know what to say in these everyday conversations. If I said I'd be lonely, Lily would be happy. But if I actually said it out loud, it would be a lie. Honestly, I wanted to say that a weight would finally be lifted off my shoulders. Because I've always felt that I didn't belong in this house. Lily must have found my silence strange. Before entering the living room, she turned to look at me. I smiled to cover it up, and Lily gave a vague smile in return. Mom, Hugo is already up. Mom, who was in the kitchen, turned around. Good morning, Hugo. I raised a hand to greet her, matching her smile, which was similar to Lily's. I didn't look like Mom, Dad, or Lily. Of course, that's only natural. In the summer when I was 8 and lost my parents. It was my adoptive mom and dad, people whose faces and names I didn't even know until that day, who reached out to me. Until 19 years ago, I was Hugo Smith. The person who took me in when I lost my home and family was Alice Reed, who was now serving me breakfast. She is my current mom. I'd like the flowers on each table to be white and orange, but do you think 2 colors might be too plain? Emily spread out the venue layout on the table and looked intently at the planner, Jessica. It depends on the number of flowers. Do you have any preferences, sir? I'm fine with whatever. Emily gently touched my arm as I answered, looking down. I'm the one who wants the wedding. Hugo is just accompanying me, so I'm grateful he even shows up for the meeting. Emily tilted her head and smiled, and I murmured sorry with just my mouth. In a month, Emily and I will be married. A week before we register our marriage, we'd moved into the house we chose together, and 6 months later, we'd have the wedding. There are 6 tables planned for the venue. Emily probably arranged it considering that I have no relatives to invite. At our first meeting, Emily had said, it's good as long as we can invite our close family and friends. I'll create a sample image of the flowers for the next meeting. Thank you. Now, let's move on to the next topic. Jessica put away the layout. The next document she pulled out was the schedule for the day. I drank some iced tea to soothe my dry throat. Whether she knew my resolve or not, Emily squeezed my arm a bit tighter. You mentioned having a non-religious ceremony. As confirmed in our last meeting, are you fine with the typical flow? Yes. We're working on our vows now, so they should be ready by the next meeting. Emily glanced at me. I nodded lightly and scratched my nose. Jessica shrugged, I'm glad. I was a bit worried because it seemed like you weren't involved at all. And this is such an important day for you both. Emily's expression softened. The tension that had been scattered across her face began to ease. Next, I'd like to fill in the timeline for the reception. I understand that your college friends will be giving the toasts. Yes, they've agreed to do it. While Emily and Jessica continued the discussion, I put an ice cube from my empty glass into my mouth. I understood. I knew my lack of enthusiasm about the wedding was making Emily anxious. But imagining how the Reed family, who weren't my real family, would feel at my wedding made me hesitant. I'm relying on Emily's understanding of my feelings. After the letter to your parents, we'll have the speeches from both families. Is that okay? My family is fine with that, but Hugo, what about you? As we neared the end of confirming the reception flow, Emily put her finger to her chin, thinking. Then she looked at me seriously. What do you mean? I have no issue with you reading a letter to your parents. Hugo, do you have anything you want to say to your parents? Emily's round eyes wavered slightly. Wait a minute, it's common for the bride to read a letter to her parents at the reception, but I've never heard of the groom doing the same. I looked to Jessica for support, and she gave a troubled look. Indeed, it's not common. The groom usually gives the final speech. But it's not unheard of, right? Emily's usually soft voice became firm. Her hands, clasped on her skirt, trembled with tension. There are cases where it's requested. Both Emily and Jessica looked at me. It seemed the final decision was up to me. Just as I was about to shake my head, Emily's small hand wrapped around mine. Her warmth spread through me. Let me think about it, I said, signaling the end of today's meeting. I was adopted by the Reed family 19 years ago, the summer I turned 8. That January, I had lost my parents in a car accident. At that age, I didn't fully understand what it meant to lose them. I missed the moment to feel sad about their sudden departure. I understood the meaning. But I couldn't grasp the sadness or the pain. It was about a week after I started living with my paternal uncle, who was the first to take me in. I was given a room there. On the first night I slept alone, I finally cried. I thought I had muffled my sobs with the blanket, but being only 8, I wasn't very successful. I remember the warmth of my uncle's hand patting my back as he came into the room, alerted by my crying. Even if the hole left by my parents couldn't be filled, I decided to live on in that house. I never imagined my uncle had different plans. After the 49-day mourning period, he called me to his room, holding a plaque with my parents' names, Michael Smith and Grace Smith. And he bowed deeply to me, touching his hands and forehead to the tatami, saying, "Hugo, I'm so sorry." He performed a formal apology, the kind that showed deep remorse. After that, I was passed from one relative's house to another. In 3 months, I stayed with 5 different relatives: paternal uncle, aunt, grandparents, maternal uncle, and grandparents. They all said they couldn't handle the sorrow I carried. Not understanding their words, I felt lost. Then a woman from the child welfare office came and presented me with 2 options. I could go to a children's home or be adopted by the Reed family, who had expressed interest in taking me in. Honestly, I was scared. Scared of hoping and then being rejected again. I was about to choose the children's home when my paternal uncle, who had been listening by my side, patted my back. "Let's meet the Reeds first," he said. My uncle had always been on my side. Even when I was being scolded by my parents as a child, he would pat my head and say, "That's enough," giving me a warm smile like winter sunlight. Even on the night he first rejected me, he had cried and apologized repeatedly. My uncle was a kind person. He must have deeply regretted not being able to take me in. Understanding his feelings, I agreed to visit the Reeds. After that, everything happened quickly. The Reeds, my current parents, had no issues with income or home environment. Strangely, I didn't feel any walls between us. I first met them in the spring. After several meetings, by the end of summer, I decided to become their adopted son. In the car on the way back, I could hear Emily sniffle as she listened to my story. The Reeds wanted me because they couldn't have children. But now, they have Lily. Since she was born 12 years ago, I haven't felt I belonged in that house. When I leave, I plan to cut ties with them. I bet they'd rather not attend the wedding. So I don't want to cause any unnecessary trouble. Emily, sniffling one last time, pouted and said, "I don't believe your parents think that way." I knew that. The Reeds had treated me the same as Lily. They scolded me when I did something wrong, celebrated my efforts, whether successful or not. Every morning, they greeted me with warm smiles, and at night, they comforted me with a calmness like the winter night sky. But I've always been scared. The uncertain relationship where I never knew when they might disappear again, or when they might bow and apologize. In the now quiet car, I glanced at Emily's expression. She had her finger on her chin, thinking about something again. "Mom, here," I said. On a Sunday, just a week before the move. I came downstairs to the living room, holding a framed picture. In the well-lit living room, there's no need to turn on the lights on sunny days. Bathed in sunlight, my mom was hunched over at the table. "What are you looking at?" "You'll hurt your eyes if you get too close," I said. Peering over her shoulder, I saw several albums spread out in front of her. "These are old albums. The photos have faded, so I have to squint to see them," she replied. "Yeah, they're really faded. Maybe it's more about how they were stored than their age." "Did you keep them in a sunny place?" I sat down next to her and looked at the photos. In the pictures, there was a young woman who must have been my mom, with a baby between her. Next to them, a woman who looked a lot like my mom was smiling from a hospital bed. "This is you, right, Mom?" "Yes, that's me." "The one in bed is my sister," she said. "And the baby you're holding is her child?" Mom nodded slowly but shallowly. She smiled, but frowning at the same time. She rubbed the wrinkles on her forehead with her wrinkled fingers. It wasn't just nostalgia, she looked sad, almost regretful. "Yes, that's my sister's child." "So, he would be your cousin," she said. "Then he's Lily's cousin too." "I've never heard about him before." "There was no need to talk about it," she replied. Contrary to her cold words, her voice was warmer and more emotional than usual. I closed my mouth, stopping myself from asking why. Her unchanged expression since earlier kept me silent. Sounds from outside drifted into the living room. It's a Sunday afternoon, so there were children's playful voices, cars passing by, and household noises from nearby houses. All these sounds helped fill the silence between me and my mom. "She seems like a kind person," I said, forcing the words out. Mom's eyes widened. "Your sister, she seems kind and warm." "I wish I could have met her," I said. Mom replied in a trembling voice, "Yes, I wish I could see her too," and closed the album. Even without her saying it explicitly, I understood. Mom would never be able to see her sister or this nephew again. Being told she couldn't have children and then losing contact with her nephew must have been devastating. It wasn't surprising that 19 years ago, my mom wished for adoption. If she could have still seen her nephew, she might not have needed me. I silently bowed my head to my mom's nephew in the album, whose name I didn't even know. I sent Mom a message, "Sorry for the sudden notice. I might be late, so please leave dinner out for me," and put my phone back in my pocket. I looked back at Emily, who was watching me. "I got it," I said. At noon, I had sent Emily a message about the album I saw with Mom yesterday. Emily had quickly replied, "Get your family register and meet me at our usual cafe after work," but she didn't reply to any of my subsequent messages. She only marked them as read after work. I rushed to the government office before it closed and managed to get a copy of my family register. I couldn't read Emily's true intentions or purpose. Emily, my classmate since high school, understood my loneliness and anxiety, as well as my parents' feelings. And she always supported and guided me. She never delved deeply into my background. She quietly absorbed the bits of information I gradually shared. This was the first time Emily touched upon my origins. I thought she might be anxious about my circumstances. But as soon as I entered the cafe, I realized I was wrong. Emily was already seated, waiting for me with her usual calm expression. She pushed her cup of cafe latte aside. I slid the family register I had just obtained across the table. "Did you look at it, Hugo?" she asked in her clear voice. I shook my head. My family register is complicated and detailed. There's no point in me checking it now. "Why did you want to see it, Emily?" "I was just curious about your mother's reaction." "My mom's reaction?" "Let's just take a look," Emily insisted. At her urging, we both lowered our gaze to the document. Of course, it started with my name. No way. This can't be. While my trembling hand covered my lips, Emily exhaled deeply, seemingly reassured and convinced of her thoughts. Maybe this person is the sister your mom was talking about. Emily's slender finger pointed to the section with my biological parents' names. Under mother in the persons recorded in the family register section. It read Lisa Reed. So, the Smiths adopted you first. Emily continued, moving her finger down. In that adoptive parents section, it listed Michael Smith and Grace Smith. The names of the parents I thought were my biological ones. You were adopted by the Smiths before you even turned 1, Emily said. Nobody ever told me. They probably intended to tell you when you were older, but never got the chance. I recalled the words of the Smith relatives. They said they couldn't empathize with my sorrow. My uncle, my grandparents, they all said the same thing. It wasn't just the grief of losing my parents. Maybe they meant they couldn't bear the sorrow I would feel upon learning this truth. I had to be told that those two were not my real parents. Was my uncle trying to say that he couldn't bear the responsibility and burden of doing so? Just as my head felt like it might explode from confusion, Emily placed her hand over mine. I'm going to turn the page, she said quietly. The next entry was the dissolution of my adoption with the Smiths. I remember hearing about this when I was going to the Reeds. They said it was for a special adoption. But it wasn't exactly that. Below the record of the dissolution with the Smiths, there was another adoption record. It listed David Reed and Alice Reed, my current parents. Let me process this for a moment, I said, taking a gulp of coffee to moisten my dry mouth. Emily had been waiting for me for quite a while. The other customers had completely changed during that time. Emily had even refilled her cafe latte twice. Okay, I said. With my single word, Emily lifted her head. I am the child of Lisa Reed, my mother's sister, and I was adopted by the Smith family soon after I was born. For some reason, I was supposed to grow up with them. But after losing the Smith parents and having nowhere to go, Mom, the Reed family took me in. Emily, who had been nodding repeatedly as she listened to my story, finally spoke. They told you it was a special adoption because you believed the Smiths were your real parents. They had to explain the separation. So they called it a special adoption. But actually, you were a regular adoptee with the Smiths, and it was just a regular dissolution. I nodded slightly in agreement with Emily's understanding. Emily's third cup of cafe latte was also empty. My iced coffee glass was left with only ice. I understand, but it's hard to accept, I said, looking down. Suddenly, a white handkerchief slid into my view. Hugo, you liar. Emily's voice was soft. When I looked up, I knew Emily would be smiling gently. I cried like a child. I felt as if my tears would soak the handkerchief she handed me. The first thing that came to mind was the faces of the Smith parents. My memories were hazy, but until today, I had never doubted that they were my real parents. On the days they scolded me, the days they rejoiced because of me, they held me in their arms. After starting elementary school, I once got into a fight with a classmate. It was a trivial matter and didn't become a big deal. But my parents listened to my vent for a long time. Usually, I had to be in bed by 9, but that day, they stayed up past midnight, nodding at my words until I started to doze off. They never denied my thoughts, nor did they reject the others. In the end, my father said, it's a miracle to fully understand everyone. But even with those you can't fully understand, you can still shake hands. Knowing this now will make you a strong and kind person, Hugo, and he hugged me again. My uncle and grandparents, even though they couldn't live with me, loved me dearly. They always visited me on my birthday and Christmas. After I went to the Reed family, I must have been quite unstable. I tried to be a good kid, focusing only on getting good grades at school. But my new father invited me to play catch. I remember my new mom sitting on a bench with a lunchbox. At first, the catch was silent, but as the sun set and my arm started to ache. It happened. My father suddenly called my name, Hugo, and threw the ball. What? I said as I threw the ball back. He caught the ball, paused for a moment, and then looked up at me. Hugo, thank you for being in this world, he said. And his throw landed perfectly in my glove. Thank you. I'm happy to be your father. I'm the happiest man in the world, he said multiple times. Why did I forget that? Even after Lily was born, my father always looked at me with the same eyes as on that day. Why did I keep doubting their love? As my tears dried up, I noticed Emily had moved to the seat next to me. Hugo, go and ask, she said. Not understanding her intention, I looked at Emily with my probably red eyes. Don't you want to ask why you went to the Smiths in the first place? Let's leave after you get your answers. Emily squeezed my hand. We looked at each other for a while. Then, I nodded slightly. Hugo, is this all your stuff? Lily, in her jersey, pointed to the last cardboard box left in the room. 6 days had passed since I learned about my birth. Today, I am leaving home. In the end, I couldn't ask my parents anything. It's sad that you won't be able to play with your cute little sister anymore once you leave. I prioritized spending time with Lily, who kept saying things like that. But it's no even an excuse. You didn't tell me it would be this hard. I wasted my whole day off. I should get paid for this, Lily complained, pouting. You said you wanted to experience moving, didn't you? I replied, handing her a sports drink. Even after gulping down half the bottle with a satisfying sound like in a commercial, Lily's face didn't brighten up. Fine, what do you want? Just so you know, no money. School rules prohibit part-time jobs, I said. Lily laughed, you're so serious, Hugo, then gave me a mature look I had never seen before. Talk to Mom properly, she said. Lily took another sip of her drink. What should I talk about? I asked, my voice tense. I didn't know how much Lily knew. I couldn't say anything reckless. I don't know, but Mom hasn't been herself. And ever since you decided to leave, you've been acting strange too. Dinner used to be fun with the four of us, but now it's not. Lily said, covering her face with the towel draped over her shoulder. And, despite her trembling voice, she kept telling me, talk to Mom. I love Mom, Dad, and you, Hugo. I don't want you to leave with things being bad between us, she said. Her weak fists hit my arm repeatedly. Again and again, she expressed her feelings. I'm sorry, I'm a terrible brother, I said. Lily had grown up. 12 years ago, she could fit in my arms, but now she reached up to my chest. Her hands, her back, and her heart. While I stood still, Lily had been growing. I felt a sting in my nose. I was happy and sad about her growth. Thank you, I said. When Lily lifted her head, she smiled cheekily, you better be really grateful. In the now empty room, I faced my mom alone. Lily had gone out with Dad to buy lunch. She was being considerate in her own way. Sitting on your knees like that on the floor, doesn't it hurt? Mom's smile had a shadow. She had the same expression as when she was looking at the album that day. I took the folded family register out of my pocket. I unfolded it and placed it on the floor between us. Yes, I thought it was about time you found out. Mom said without any surprise or lament. She took a deep breath and began to speak, as if resigning herself. Hugo, as it's written there, you are my nephew. Seeing me nod firmly, she nodded once as well. It felt like we were confirming our feelings, like a mutual understanding. Even after knowing and speaking the truth, nothing would change. It was a moment of confirming our resolve and trust in each other. Your real mother, my sister Lisa Reed, died shortly after giving birth to you. She was always frail. When we learned she was pregnant with you at 18, the whole family opposed the idea. Even you, Mom? I asked. When I was 13 at the time, I loved my sister very much, but that's no even an excuse. I wasn't shocked by what I heard. If I had heard this when I was 15, holding Lily for the first time, I might have sunk into deep sadness. Mom moved a bit closer to me and continued speaking, but, she said. My sister, who wanted to have a child with the person she loved, disappeared almost like a runaway, but she sent me a letter. When I rushed to the hospital and saw you just born, I felt foolish for opposing her. I thought so from the bottom of my heart. Mom's voice and hands began to tremble. My sister only told me that the man who was your father was no longer around at that time. So, I don't know anything about your father. I'm sorry. If I found out, I'd be angry, I said jokingly. Mom shrugged and replied, if only anger was all it would take. When my sister passed away, I was just a child and couldn't do anything. I felt countless times how powerless I was, seeing you in the Smiths' arms. So, when I became an adult, I got a job and married, ready to welcome you anytime. Of course. It was best if you could stay happy with the family who adopted you. The Smith family loved me, I said. Yes, I felt that as soon as I saw you with them. That's why both your dad and I grew to love you even more, Mom said. Not fully understanding her words, I tilted my head. Seeing my confusion, Mom gave me a gentle smile. At first, I wanted to protect you because my sister cherished you more than her own life. It felt like a duty. Or maybe my love for my sister was stronger. But after reuniting with you and seeing you surrounded by so much love, I wanted you to feel that you belong with us. I felt tears streaming down my cheeks. Your dad said that you had been loved by so many but still felt insecure. What you needed was a place where you belong. Mom said as she wiped my tears. Congratulations on your wedding, she said, her voice shaking uncontrollably. Thank you for everything, I said, curling up and holding the family register close to my chest. Thinking of all the people who had supported and loved me. My hair felt heavy with wax and spray. Formal attire felt incredibly restrictive, and I lost count of how many deep breaths I had taken today. Next to me, Emily, dressed in an orange gown, gave me a thumbs up. Now, a letter from the groom to his family. The female MC announced solemnly to the venue. I stood up slowly and walked to the stand microphone. After clearing my throat, I faced forward. I turned towards the table where Dad, Mom, and Lily were seated. It might be unusual to hear a groom's letter, but I have people I must express my gratitude to. May I have your time and attention? I asked. The audience responded with applause. I took an envelope from my inner pocket. I pulled out a single sheet of stationery from the envelope. On that single sheet, I had written the names Lisa Reed, Michael Smith, Grace Smith, David Reed, and Alice Reed. I have 3 mothers and 2 fathers, I said. The audience murmured briefly but then quieted down. Emily's parents nodded with calm expressions. I was glad I had told them on the day we registered our marriage. Lily wasn't surprised or crying. She watched with a serious expression, waiting for the rest of my letter. When people hear just this part, they often say, it must have been tough, or you went through a lot. But I never found it tough or difficult. There were some lonely nights, but looking back, I feel I spent every day in a warm and loving home, I continued. I held up the sheet of stationery. There were gasps from the audience. The stationery only had the names of my 5 parents. I had told Emily that I wanted to speak from my heart rather than read a prepared speech. She had agreed without hesitation, saying, "That's so like you, Hugo," with a smile. "I am here today because of the love of everyone. I am the happiest person in the world. Please let me express my heartfelt gratitude to my 5 parents who brought me into this world and raised me." I walked over to the Reed family's table. I made eye contact with Dad, Mom, and Lily in turn. Thank you for being my family. Thank you for all you've done, and I look forward to our future together. Applause erupted from the audience. Amid the unending cheers, Dad and Mom hugged me. I looked up to the heavens and, with a clear voice, said, "Thank you," to my other 3 parents as well,